All right, so welcome back to another episode of SFA Live right here at the Summer Fancy Food Show. Again, I'm your host, Paul Barron from Foodable Network, and we are covering continued coverage of this event, but also bringing in food service operators kind of on the set today. So this is going to be fun because you're an actual food service operator. You're
I'm an
right
actual
here,
food service operator, yes.
not especially food maker.
No, I'm a food maker. I spend most of my time in my kitchen.
Well, in the sense of packaged foods.
Oh, no.
Yeah. All right, so Patti, let's talk a little bit about Delaware and Hudson. Tell me about your concept.
Sure. Delaware and Hudson is my restaurant in Brooklyn. We're medium sized. We're 70 seats or so.
Yeah.
We started out as a 40-seat restaurant, all tasting menu.
Okay.
In a very Brooklyn kind of way.
Yeah.
We serve mid-Atlantic cuisine. So coming up, I worked with a lot of Italians, for example, and they had very specific ideas of regionality and
Right.
what their food meant to them, and it was all very personal.
Yes.
But nobody talked about American food that way, or certainly the people that I was around didn't. And I always joked that if I owned my own restaurant, I would make it mid-Atlantic cuisine,
Go
like what
that
I grew
route.
up on. And so when I got the opportunity, I did, and it's really worked out great. You know, there's a lot of interesting interesting rows to hoe.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brooklyn is a very unique community right now in terms of kind of food artisans being
It's
birthed
amazing.
right there.
I mean, the things going on in Brooklyn, from everything from production we were talking about a little
Right.
earlier,
Yeah.
to like large scale production of artisanal products, to just the restaurant scene in general. I mean, there's so many things.
Yeah.
So many
I was
ethnicities.
surprised with the show here. There's a whole row of New York made, and then there within that row there's Brooklyn only,
Yeah.
which is really great to see
Well,
that much
it's amazing
innovation.
the support. You
Yeah.
know, there are a lot of incubators and a lot of facilities where you can, kind of come together and get advice and do things. So
Yeah. I love
there's
it.
always really interesting stuff coming up.
All right, so the big question that we've been kind of approaching here on several of the live episodes is kind of this convergence between specialty food, packaged products or made for certain specific applications, and food service, so the chefs and the operators like yourself. And those two areas converging now.
Right.
Where do you see specialty foods being used in things like your menu?
Well, I mean, obviously, there are things that we'll never be able to produce, right? So there's always the opportunity, I mean, in a food show, there's all the sweeteners, the honeys, the syrups, all those things.
Right.
All those things are of profound interest to me. Coffees, and just things that you would never see or think of.
Right.
I mean, then there are the ideas that maybe I'll take and tweak and do something on
Sure.
my own, but there are so many things I don't have the time or space to do. So coming to a show like this gives me a lot of new ideas and lets me see a lot of really interesting products.
It's interesting you say when you look at the food service side of it, how they're integrating it both into menu but into offerings now. So I've seen many operators start to leverage some of these specialty food products almost as a differentiator within their menu. Like if, Mike's Hot Honey in application with the specialty hot chicken market, which is
Mike's
moving
Hot
like...
Honey, Brooklyn product.
There you go, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. Those kind of applications seem
sure.
to be
Or
natural for you.
the people who are starting to kind of brand up their own, their things, where it's actually a value-added thing
Yeah.
to be able to offer those,
Yeah.
those products. I think
Especially
that's a
if it
really
can be recognized regionally.
Exactly.
So with a Brooklynite, them really being able to say, okay, that's Mike's Honey. I'm going to go over there because they have it.
And I'm in Brooklyn. I have very limited storage, very limited production space. So, there are just things that it makes a lot more sense for me to be looking at in these kind of, in this kind of availability.
Yeah. As an operator, you're obviously always exploring new cuisines, new flavor trends. What are you seeing out there that's kind of piqued your interest?
I have a number of my staff are vegans or plant-based people.
Okay, yep.
So all of that is always really interesting
Big
to
movement there.
Big movement, and just see even the expansion of productions of different sorts of grains and flours that you could use in place of those kind of proteins and things. I think that's really super interesting. I myself was diagnosed with diabetes this year, and so for me, looking at a lot of the new sugar replacements
Right.
and those sort of things, monk fruit and stevia and all that kind of stuff, those things are interesting. but trend-wise, I mean, I don't know. There's always
Always exploding.
always the thing you're walking around the corner going, "Oh my God, they did that with coconut." You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
yeah, it's so
I
fun.
find, as we get to a chance to talk to a lot of chefs, operators, owner operators, um, one of the things that we're trying to explore is kind of this evolution of food as a whole. Do you feel like because plant-based, of course, has emerged, and really the last 18 months it's become mainstream. There was always a culture behind it, but it was never really as mainstream as it is now. Do you feel like plant-based, gluten-free is now, it's not a add-on, it's like a table stake, at any restaurant to have a gluten-free option? Do you feel like those are just, this is where the food industry is and this is where we're going to grow from, or do you feel like those are fads?
No, I think it's kind of a logical extension.
They're here to stay.
Right. I mean, just as I don't know, you learn to eat different things.
Yeah,
Or you learn to-
evolution.
right.
Yeah, and I think also societal pressures come in,
Or,
the generational
or
aspect.
financial pressures
Yep.
or availability pressures. I don't know. I think that when I started out in the food service business, it was like orange roughy and Chilean sea bass, and those
Right.
aren't things that you see all the time
Right,
anymore.
right.
So people have evolved their ideas of eating those sorts of things, and I think people evolve their ideas of eating other sorts of things.
Yeah.
There's just so many factors.
Well, and food waste being a factor, so people are using, we did a guy here, Graffiti Earth in New York, who's doing ugly, vegetables basically, and getting these amazing dishes coming out of that.
Well,
So
I think that's
kind of
always an
fun.
interesting thing.
Yeah.
The food waste thing to me is the most interesting thing because when you're in a restaurant or you're a chef or an owner operator, whatever you are that you're working directly with the food,
Right.
You're always trying to figure out something to do with those. Whether it goes to a staff meal or
Yeah.
it goes to some sort of stuffing or something. So there's always something that's being used there. I think it's interesting that the public is embracing that now as a I don't want to say cause, but as another element
Yeah,
of their
kind of
diet.
social responsibility
Yeah,
to a certain
exactly.
extent. All right, last question for you, and that is dining out trends. We've seen some pretty significant shifts on the fact that it's no longer breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We're seeing a lot of inserts now into dining occasions that are creating whole new categories.
Right.
What are your thoughts from a food service operator side?
From a food service operator.
It's no longer a day part
yeah.
thing.
Yeah, no, I just wish the day part, I wish there were more day parts. I think, certainly, I think people living in New York gives you kind of a different
Right.
kind of a perspective in a lot of ways, but I think that people are freer about eating out these days. I mean, whether it's the emergence of fast casual, I'm not sure, or that sort of melding of day parts, but that people are happy to stop in for a small drink and a little
Right.
snack,
Yeah.
even if it's in a more formal setting. That people seem to be enjoying the idea of eating things that are prepared for them more.
Right. I like
But
it.
by the same token, people are crazy.
Yeah. Well,
You'll never be able to predict what's coming next.
Well, and food is such a very interesting palette as it continues to transform in our society, and really how artisans like yourself are using it to create these amazing masterpieces. So
Well, thank you. I hope I create a masterpiece
there
soon.
you go.
Thanks.
All right, Patti Jackson, it was great having you
It
on
was
today.
lovely.
Thank
Thanks
you
so
so much.
Take care.
All right, so make sure and stay tuned right here for our continuing coverage of the Summer Fancy Food Show. We'll catch you on the next episode.